This matter strikes at the very heart of our rule of law and calls into serious question the ethics and conduct of those at the highest levels in the Prime Minister's office.
That's Opposition Leader Andrew Scheer calling on some of Justin Trudeau's most senior advisors to testify about what happened between the Prime Minister's office, Montreal construction giant SNC-Lavalin, and the former Attorney General, the government's lawyer. Scheer is even pointing to suggestions there could be criminal activity here, obstruction of justice, if the PMO did interfere in the ongoing criminal case. And at the center of all of this is Jody Wilson-Raybould.
You were not ever pressured by it. Can you answer that?
I'm not going to comment.
Are you planning on making some comments?
That's reporters. They tracked her down. It's just hours after the Globe and Mail reported that she refused to give in to pressure from the PMO to help SNC-Lavalin. Instead of defending Trudeau, saying the allegations are false, she refused all comment, giving the allegations even more fuel. Later, she said she couldn't comment as she's bound by solicitor-client privilege. But here's the thing. Last month, Wilson-Raybould was effectively fired from her post as Justice Minister. She was moved in a cabinet shuffle. Check out the statement that she made at that time. She said, "It's a pillar of our democracy that our system of justice be free from even the perception of political interference." So what was that all about? Maybe this? Behind the scenes, SNC, the country's largest construction firm, had been madly lobbying the federal government, the PMO, and the PM's close friend and principal secretary, Gerald Butts. We checked out the lobby registry, and it shows over 50 communications between SNC-Lavalin and the government dating back to just the start of 2017. 14 are with the PMO, including people like Gerald Butts, and it names that justice and law enforcement issues are always listed as a subject of their communication. So SNC is facing charges now of paying massive bribes to former Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi's regime to secure contracts there. And it was for pushing for a deal there that would allow it to avoid a lengthy trial through something called a remediation agreement. That's now being contested. Those agreements would allow a company to acknowledge wrongdoing, pay a fine, but avoid criminal prosecution and avoid being cut off from future contracts from the federal government. In 2018, the Trudeau government changed the criminal code to allow these agreements, something that SNC-Lavalin had lobbied for. The government's response to all of these allegations, well, Trudeau and his new Attorney General were very quick to deny that anyone in the PMO ever directed Wilson-Raybould to make a decision on the case.
No direction was given to my predecessor. No direction has been given to myself in regards to this decision.
The PMO is now adding that Butts and Wilson-Raybould did talk about the SNC case, but says it was her that brought it up and that when she did, Gerald Butts passed her on to the proper authorities at the Privy Council. The political opposition isn't having any of this.
The Prime Minister says that sunshine is the best disinfectant, so let's shine some sunlight onto this issue.
Were there any discussions of a special deal between the Prime Minister's office and the former Attorney General about SNC-Lavalin?
We're asking a very simple question that hasn't been answered.
What exactly did Gerald Butts say to the former Attorney General in that December conversation?
The PMO is sticking to its line that there was no direction from anyone in their office. And Jody Wilson-Raybould herself, well, she still has no comment, but her dad made this comment on Facebook. Her demotion now makes sense, ugly political sense. Mom would be proud. Joining me now is Chris Hall. He, of course, is the CBC's National Affairs Editor and host of The House on CBC Radio. So, Chris, the new Attorney General, David Lametti, is now saying that there's no need for the Prime Minister's senior officials to testify, as Andrew Scheer has demanded, because there's no wrongdoing, that these are just allegations in the newspaper. Do you think that the government will be able to put this behind them?
Well, David Lametti did make the rounds of interviews, including one with me, Wendy, and a couple of things that he said. He has not talked to Jody Wilson-Raybould about her complaints that she felt pressured. He's going solely on the basis of what the Prime Minister has said. So yes, he's not keen to have a judicial or a Justice Committee inquiry here, but he did say he would appear if asked. And what's really interesting about it, back when the Conservatives were in power, they said that ministers could answer questions before committee, but not staff. And here the Conservatives are demanding access to Liberal staff in the Prime Minister's office to find out who pressured her, if anyone. So it's an interesting strategy. We'll see what happens. But as it stands now, David Lametti saying he doesn't see the need for this kind of review by the committee, but if there is one, he will happily testify.
Over the years, you've seen a lot of different governments make a lot of different denials about allegations. Let's just take a quick look at what the government's saying about these allegations and get your reaction. Can we hear this?
At no time did I or my office direct the current or previous Attorney General to make any particular decision.
No direction was given to my predecessor. No direction has been given to myself in regards to this decision.
No direction, no direct. That's not exactly what the Globe was alleging, right? So what's the thinking here?
Well, I'm not sure there's a strategy per se, Wendy. This came out, and the first reaction from the Prime Minister was there was no direction. As you pointed out, this report said there were allegations that she felt pressured. If there was direction, a lot of lawyers online and ones that I've talked to on the phone said, really, Jody Wilson-Raybould would have had no other course but to resign. That's the convention, if she felt she was being pressured in her role as Attorney General to do something, particularly to intervene in a criminal case. So as this has unfolded, the direction included then there was no pressure. We now know that the Prime Minister and others are saying that you can talk as Attorney General to your cabinet colleagues about something like this, SNC-Lavalin, a very important Quebec-based company, but there can be no direct intervention.
Long history between SNC-Lavalin and the Liberal government in particular. I mean, these are always stories or allegations of money and power. What is that relationship?
Yeah, well, let's start with Quebec itself. The Liberals have a long history of success electorally if they do well in Quebec, and not such a great history when they don't. So with SNC-Lavalin based there, it's an important company, iconic in the province, and we know that over the years from 2004 to 2011 that SNC-Lavalin employees were directed to give money to the Liberal Party, almost $85,000 worth of donations which had to be returned. Clearly they have a lot of sway, and clearly they are an important and, as I said, iconic company based in a province where the Liberals need to do well in an election that's not that far away.
The government is trying furiously to put this behind them. Will they? Is this going away?
Well, they don't sit this week, so it's possible that it may lose some of its interest, but certainly journalists of all stripes are now looking, and every organization looking in to see what else might be here to try to get the answers that we really don't know yet. What was the pressure, who applied it, and what was the result of that?
Chris Hall, thanks so much.
Okay.
CBC's National Affairs editor, Chris Hall. So how did construction company SNC-Lavalin get so powerful? The history of SNC-Lavalin goes back to the turn of the century when a Canadian government engineer named Arthur Surveyor quit to set up his own small shop near the old port in Montreal. He began with a drafting table, a typewriter, and not much else. He helped build one of Canada's first hydroelectric power stations. And the firm grew, along with Quebec's demand for electricity.
It's a very good deal for SNC.
In 1991, SNC merged with Lavalin, becoming the largest engineering and construction company in Canada, and a major international powerhouse. SNC-Lavalin has offices in 50 countries around the world, employs 50,000 people, and in 2017 reported $9.3 billion in revenue. It's involved in everything from upgrading coal mines in Colombia to developing nuclear power plants in China. In Canada, their projects include Vancouver's Canada Line, Toronto's 407, and in 2010 won the bid to build the $1.3 billion mega hospital in Montreal. And that's when things started getting complicated. Allegations that SNC had rigged the competition to secure the Montreal hospital contract. Then, in 2012, Quebec's anti-corruption squad arrested SNC-Lavalin's former CEO, Pierre Duhem. And now, 6 years later, Duhem has pleaded guilty to helping a public servant commit breach of trust. And then there's the political wrongdoing. Last fall, the company's former vice president, Normand Morin, pleaded guilty to charges of violating Canada's elections financing rules around this elaborate scheme that funneled more than $117,000 to political parties, including the federal Liberals. Joining me now is the former Ontario Attorney General and the Executive Director of the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, Michael Bryant. So if these allegations, and they are from unnamed sources in the Globe and Mail, if they're true, how big a deal is this?
Oh, this is a big deal. I mean, it's a political scandal, obviously, but it might be a constitutional crisis. It might be a crime that's taken place because somebody, the allegation is, with a lot of power, tried to politicize a prosecution, and that's obstruction of justice under our criminal code.
So what is, like I looked up obstruction of justice, which you're saying is a possibility here, and it says everyone who willfully attempts to obstruct, pervert, or defeat the course of justice is guilty of an indictable offense. So you're talking about, with like a possible prison term, you're talking about a criminal offense.
Yes.
If this is true.
Right. I've seen obstruction of justice charges laid in circumstances with far less evidence than we've got in this particular case, but we don't know whether or not an investigation is in fact underway.
Is this something that you think the RCMP should be looking into?
You know, whether I think it or not is neither here nor there. I wouldn't wish a charge on anybody. But what the Canadian Civil Liberties Association is concerned with is the idea that there's one justice system for everybody, and then there's a special justice system where people get a pass, and that would apply to SNC-Lavalin, that would apply to people in the Prime Minister's office, and it can't be that way. That can't be right. That has all the hallmarks of a corrupt police state. Maybe that's how Kremlin works, but it's not how Ottawa is supposed to work.
We don't know that this actually happened. These are just allegations, and now the Prime Minister's office is saying, no, we did not direct anyone.
Right.
And people are jumping to a lot of conclusions
That's
here.
Right. Yeah, well, and we won't know. I mean, until the RCMP says that there isn't an investigation, we won't know whether or not there is one or not, because they're not going to close the door until they're sure. Look, I find it hard to believe that anybody would take that risk where they would walk in the room or get on the phone with the Attorney General, who has a quasi-judicial power to prosecute matters, and with whom, if you have a conversation about a prosecution, you risk committing a crime. Why would you even get on the phone in the first place or walk into the room if that's what happened? I find it hard to believe that that would be possible, but you know, we have a report that's been provided by the Globe and Mail, and we have a former Justice Minister who's neither confirmed nor denied it. And we had a Prime Minister who was careful with his words, and it's enough, I think, it's fair to say, to give people pause. And we want our government to give us confidence in the system, and that's the challenge that the government now has.
Much of this centers on something called a remediation agreement, which is meant to sort of avoid a costly trial, but also was something that SNC-Lavalin was lobbying for strongly. It was brought into the criminal code by this government about a year and a half ago.
Right.
You're shaking your head.
Well, very suspicious circumstances. I mean, to put a criminal code amendment in the budget bill is very unusual because everything that goes in the budget bill is going to pass with a majority government. So we never had a debate about that particular provision. Normally, if I went to the Premier and said, I can't get this thing through because we don't have enough legislative time, please put it in the budget bill, that'd be one thing. But the report is that this was done against the wishes of the Justice Minister, who then, of course, didn't have any choice but to vote for it because that's a confidence matter, is the budget bill. So extremely fishy circumstances if, in fact, the PMO was behind that criminal code amendment going in there in the first place and then seeking its application. It just ends up looking like there's one justice system for everybody and then a special one for the friends of the Prime Minister, and that shouldn't be the case. We don't know that any of it is true, but there's obviously a number of answers and more facts that will have to be unfolded, and we'll have to also weed through and decipher what the code speak means.